What's up, YouTube? Zero here, and today I have an incredible Weezing, Nihilego, and Alolan Muk EX deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll talk about why this deck really comes together and works really well. This deck is great to apply status conditions, especially poison, so you can be poisoning your opponents, lowering their health over time to victory. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, let's talk about this deck. Weezing was a pretty good card when Pokemon TCG Pocket first released. You had Tackle for 1 energy, 1 dark energy, which did 30. And also, if Weezing was in the active slot, you can apply poison to your opponents. That card has not changed. It's been around for a while. It was a pretty good card to start. Then Arceus came out, and so Weezing went away because everybody was using Arceus, and Arceus is not affected by special conditions. And now the game has shifted back a little bit. Nihilego has made that possible. So I want to start by talking about Nihilego. Nihilego is an Ultra Beast. Just dropped in the Extra Dimensional Crisis packs. So if you are looking for Nihilego, go check out those packs. Has 1 move and 1 ability. The move is New Wave for 1 dark energy, and 1 colorless energy does 30 damage and also poisons your opponent. The ability is incredible, especially if you are a poison type deck, you're trying to apply poison. So the ability for Nihilego is more poison. Your opponent's active Pokemon takes plus 10 damage from being poisoned. And this effect also stacks. So not only does it take plus 10 damage from 1 Nihilego, but it'll take plus 20 damage if you have 2 Nihilegos on the playing field. That's pretty incredible. If your opponent is poisoned, it takes the 10 regular damage, then plus 10 from 1 Nihilego, and if you have a second Nihilego on the playing field, will take another plus 10. So each drop of poison, each poison bleed off can do up to 30 damage with 2 Nihilegos on the field. That's absolutely incredible. So you can add 30 damage on top of any form of damage that you are doing if your opponent is poisoned, if you have 2 Nihilegos on the field. So that's absolutely awesome. Nihilego really makes this deck work and really makes poison decks in general really potent. Now let's talk about Weezing, because Nihilego and Weezing are the stars of this deck. I was actually hoping to create a deck where Alolan Muk was the star, and it turns out that Weezing and Nihilego are the stars of this deck. Mainly Weezing, because Weezing is fantastic in terms of you only require 1 dark energy for Tackle for 30. But if Weezing is in that active slot, it has an ability, Ghastly. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned. Which means if Weezing is in the active slot, you can poison and do an extra 30 damage if you have 2 Nihilegos on the playing field. Of course, only 1 Nihilego, you are doing an extra 20, but that's still a pretty fair amount. Weezing only requires 1 dark energy, so 1 energy you're doing 30 damage, and you can potentially be doing 60 damage by poisoning your opponent. Only for 1 energy, and of course a couple of Nihilegos on the field. That's pretty incredible. If you're looking for Weezing, it is going to be found in the Genetic Apex Mewtwo packs, so take a look at those if you're looking for Weezing. Now, you can't talk about Weezing without Coughing. Of course, you need Coughing to evolve into Weezing. Coughing is pretty basic, nothing special. You can find it in the Genetic Apex Mewtwo packs. It's not a card that I'm going to rave about. But let's talk about the last evolution chain in this deck, Alolan Muk and Alolan Grimer. Grimer can somewhat be more of a star than Alolan Muk, which is actually kind of funny. I've won several battles just by having Alolan Grimer in the active slot and 2 Nihilegos on the bench. So Alolan Grimer may not look special, but for 1 Dark Energy is Poison Gas. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. So again, Alolan Grimer paired with 2 Nihilegos, you're doing 30 damage just to poison your opponent. That is incredible to start the match, especially against a lot of weaker basic Pokemon. You can take them out in only a few turns if your opponent doesn't react. Of course, if they have a Pokemon Center Lady, they can cure themselves of poison. If they evolve, they can cure themselves of poison or retreat. But still, that's a ton of damage that you can be doing to your opponent really quickly. Of course, you have to have a few pieces lined up and fall into place. But if you do, that's a lot of damage early on. Then let's talk about the Alolan Muk EX. This for 3 energy, 2 dark, 1 colorless is Chemical Panic for 80 damage. Now, this has a very special ability attached to Chemical Panic. On top of doing the 80 damage, 1 special condition from among Sleep, Burned, Confuse, Paralyze, and Poison is chosen at random, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now affected by that special condition. Any special conditions already affecting that Pokemon will not be chosen. So on top of poisoning your opponent, if your opponent is already poisoned, your Alolan Muk can status affect another condition onto that Pokemon. Perhaps you burn them and you do even more damage on top of your 30. You're going to do another 20. So you're doing 50 damage just from status conditions. Maybe you paralyze them or put them asleep, potentially preventing them from attacking you. This is absolutely awesome when paired with Pokemon that can poison, because now Alolan Muk can apply another status condition, and your opponent can be affected by multiple status conditions, which is pretty awesome and can really help you win the battle. So now I've talked about the Pokemon, let's talk about the supporting cast, or the supporting cards in this deck. A couple of the basic ones, Pokeball, to draw basic Pokemon out of the deck into the hand. That's going to be important to try and draw your Nihilego to get it on the playing field as quickly as possible. Professor's Research, draw 2 cards, of course getting all of the cards you need from the deck as quickly as possible. Next, let's talk about Koga. Koga is awesome when paired with Weezing. So Koga, you put your Muk or Weezing into from the active spot into your hand. This does not work with Alolan Muk, so do not try to use it with Alolan Muk, but it does work with Weezing. So Weezing, if it's in the active slot and has taken a fair bit of damage, you can draw it back into your active hand, essentially healing it. Now, of course, you're going to have to play it again. You're going to have to play the Coughing again. You're going to have to play the Weezing again. However, you can save your Weezing from fainting by utilizing Koga. It's absolutely awesome. You can draw it out of that active slot after you poison. You can poison if your Weezing has minimal HP left. Draw it back into your hand and then put it on the playing field again. Maybe, if you're lucky enough, you had a Coughing already on the field, so you can draw your Weezing back into the hand, heal it from all damage, and then play it on that other Coughing you already had on the field. So it's a really good card, a really strategic card to utilize. And that Koga can be found in the Genetic Apex Mewtwo packs, just like your Weezings. The last few supporting cards I have Cyrus. Cyrus, you switch 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it into the active slot. This is going to be pretty important. You're poisoning Pokemon. You're doing 10, 20, 30 damage with your poison. There's a good chance that if your opponent doesn't have Pokemon Center Lady or some form of way to heal the poison, they're going to retreat their Pokemon onto the bench to heal them from the poison. Cyrus is going to draw those Pokemon back into the active slot. You're already going to do damage because you're going to poison them once at the end of your turn. They're going to feel the effects from poison. So your opponent trying to heal up their Pokemon are going to draw them to the bench. Cyrus is going to force them to have that Pokemon back in the active slot so you can deal damage to the already weakened Pokemon. You can see with the cards I already have in this deck, Weezing only dealing 30 damage for tackle. Alolan Muk only dealing 80 damage. Nihilego only dealing 30 damage. So really this deck is focused on that status condition poison. It's focused on getting that poison to eat through your enemy's health. Cyrus is going to help you get those Pokemon that have healed up from poison on the bench but still have damage on them back to the active slot so you can keep hitting them for damage. So Cyrus is going to be crucial in this deck. And you can find Cyrus in these Space Time Smackdown Palkia packs. Last but not least, I have Rocky Helm. And there are going to be some questions as to why Rocky Helm over Poison Barb. And I'll talk about that after I talk about Rocky Helm. Rocky Helm, those of you who've been playing the game for a little while already know if your opponent attacks you with an attack, it deals 20 damage to your opponent. This is great to do extra damage to your opponent. It's going to be dealing 20 damage for every time your opponent attacks. And if your opponent is already poisoned, that's going to be 20 damage on top of a potential 30. That's 50 damage just because your opponent decided to attack you. That's a huge amount. And that's also the reason why I prefer Rocky Helm over Poison Barb. If your opponent is already poisoned, and they do not have a way of clearing that poison, or your opponent chooses not to clear the poison, then Poison Barb is going to do nothing. Your opponent is already poisoned. Poison Barb does not enhance the poison. It does not poison them again. They're already poisoned. So you're only doing 30 damage. However, if they're poisoned, if your opponent is poisoned, and you have a Rocky Helm, you're now doing more damage. You can do 50 damage, of course, if you have both your Nihilegos on the playing field. If not, you're still doing a fair amount of damage, whether it's 40, whether it's 30. Rocky Helm is always going to do 20 if your opponent attacks. If your opponent is poisoned and they don't clear it, Poison Barb does nothing. In this deck, almost every Pokemon has the opportunity to poison. Weezing poisons, Grimer poisons, Nihilego poisons. You're going to poison your opponent. You don't really need a Poison Barb. You're going to find a way to poison your opponent. So utilize Rocky Helm because Rocky Helm is going to give you an opportunity to deal more damage to your opponent. The potential of dealing 50 damage because your opponent couldn't clear their poison and they decided to attack you when you had Rocky Helm is absolutely epic. So that's why I go with Rocky Helm in this slot. Let me know what you think of this deck. It's pretty awesome that Weezing has found a spot back into the fray because Weezing had gone away for a little while. Weezing was pretty good. Then it went away thanks to Arceus, and now it's back. I'm not seeing a lot of people use it, probably because of all the Ultra Beasts that came out. A lot of good cards, a lot of good decks, but this is a great deck that can really finish your opponent off quickly. Weezing is very easy to get in that active slot and going. Nihilego just needs to be on the playing field to enhance poison, but you can really eat through your opponent's health really quickly, really fast. As you can see here with these Weedles that are on the playing field, easily taken out just because of Poison and my Weezing. Very easy to get set up with this deck, and you're just going to bleed your opponents dry with Poison, which is why I love this deck and I love this combination. Let me know in the comments section if you're going to try this deck out. What are some of the cards that you may swap out, swap in? Do you like Weezing and Alolan Muk and Nihilego as a combo? Is there another card that would work better in this deck? Let me know in the comments section. If there's a Pokemon that you want to see in a deck, also let me know. I'll come out with a build for it. Doesn't matter the Pokemon that could be what you feel is the worst Pokemon in the game. I'll still try and figure out a deck that makes it work. Let me know in the comments section. I'm glad Weezing's back. Gas Leak is absolutely awesome. And pairing Poison with Rocky Helm is completely dirty. You're going to see in this final clip my Grimer just completely wearing down a Darkrai, which is awesome. Who would have thought that a Grimer with Poison Gas plus 2 Nihilegos is going to be able to take out a Darkrai? I never would have guessed it. I'm sure months ago, nobody would have guessed that that would have been possible. That a Grimer could potentially take out a Darkrai with Poison Gas, or almost take out a Darkrai with Poison Gas. But yup, it does happen. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much in advance for doing so. I do really appreciate it. It does really help out me and my channel. Until next time, peace.